We are live. We are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with DB. Last week, we had a very intense, informational, and intentional conversation on the R word. That's right, reparations. And we encourage you to go on Dwayne Bryant's Facebook to rewatch the conversation we had with the Iron Man. And when you watch it, we encourage you to share it as well. But today, we are discussing the G word. We are talking about grief. Grief. We're having that conversation with Jocelyn Jones. Jocelyn Jones is an author, a storyteller, a motivational speaker, entrepreneur, and a minister of the Word of God. Come on. Come on. It's that Word of God. That got me right there. So she would describe herself she would describe her life as a roller coaster, but there is nothing in her life that she will change. The lessons she learned from her most significant failures have helped mold her into the woman she is today. Her mission is to help you live a life rooted in hope and driven by purpose. Jocelyn Jones is the founder of Faith on the Journey, and they have services such as she does drama healing groups and Christian life coaching. And so we have a very special guest, Jocelyn Jones, with us today. And you already know Dwayne Bryant, one of the greatest men to walk this earth. And so it's with honor and pleasure, I would love to bring to the stage Dwayne Bryant and Jocelyn Jones.
Hey, Jeff, how you doing, brother?
Man, I am great. As he said before we went live, I had some 5-hour energy. More than enough energy right now.
Hey, listen, the word says a man's gift make room for him. So I guarantee you somebody's going to be watching this at some point. They're going to say, listen, we got to get that guy on our show to introduce whatever it is, whether it's Trevor Noah or whatever. They're going to realize that we need that guy energy. So I'm saying it here first. You heard it here first. So when it happens, you're going to say, DB, you already told me it was going to happen. You good?
I receive it en el nombre de Jesucristo.
It sounds like you speaking Spanish, brother.
That was Spanish.
Somebody else said he's speaking in tongues. Now, hey, before we continue with Jocelyn, you said she has drama healing groups?
Yes, trauma healing groups.
Oh, trauma. I thought you said drama. I thought she was like reenacting drama. I'm like, what the world? Okay, so listen, I'm going to leave you alone, brother. I'm going to come over to Jocelyn. Jocelyn Jones, how you doing?
Hey, D, I am so excited to be here with you. Thank you. Thank you for what you do.
Listen, I am more excited to be here with you. I know you're extremely busy. I know you have a lot of things you're doing in Chicago. And this topic, grief, I mean, from what you told me before, is that every day you're getting briefings on grief and on crime and things. What happens? What do you hear every single day that makes you even more in tune to this topic?
Well, like you said, I live in the Chicagoland area, and I do work with a nonprofit right now. And our role is to address the violence in Chicago. And to say that the violence is out of control right now is an understatement, unfortunately. And even with it being shelter in place, you would think that violence would go down, but it's not happening. I'm hearing about babies being shot and killed daily, innocent bystanders. And so it's to the point where you hear about it, you have to, it's a way where you feel like, okay, I can't just treat this person as a number. But at the same time, when you hear about the story after story, you start to numb because it's so much loss that you're experiencing or hearing about at the same time. And so the grief is real right now, not just because of what's happening with COVID, which we'll talk about, but right now in Chicago, I'm hearing about it left and right. And then with COVID, that complicates things, right? Because people are dying from natural causes. Then people are grieving the loss of losing their businesses. They're grieving the loss of losing fellowship with people at their churches, and they're grieving a loss of just so many different elements, because grief is not just narrowly focused to death of a person alone. You grieve anything that you lose that you loved, right? And so this experience with COVID complicates things, because the one thing that we used to do, especially in the faith community or in the African American community, we together when we're grieving. Yeah. And now with COVID being a barrier where we're no longer able to assemble and touch each other and feel each other, that separation causes isolation, which leads people to feeling this journey of grief alone, which can cause a lot of depression. And so people are struggling by themselves in isolation with grief right now.
I tell you what, we're going to do something I have never done in any conversation with DB. What I would like to do, if it's okay with you, is to open us up in prayer, and then we can continue the conversation. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right, so here, reach out. As a matter of fact, everybody who's watching, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on Instagram, YouTube, whatever, just put your hands up or whatever. Dear Heavenly Father, God, we thank you for another day. We thank you for waking us up. We thank you for getting started. We thank you for at least giving us the ability to see, hear, touch, taste, and all of the senses that we have, Father God. Right now, we have the wonderful, the great Jocelyn Jones. She's going to be talking to us today about grief. If there's anyone who's listening, who's grieving, who's sad, who's depressed, who's anxious, Father, allow this moment in time to be a place that they can come for healing, for restoration, for solutions, for strategies, because we have never imagined such a difficult time that we have right now. And the truth is, all of us at some point, we've had either experienced it directly or indirectly. So allow this conversation to be a benefit and a blessing to your people, to your world, to your planet. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So JJ, what is grief?
Grief is an experience, is what you feel anytime you experience a loss. So of something that you love, right? And so I love my parents, I might love a spouse, but it could also be something that you treasured that you lost. So for example, you might've had a dream that you wanted to have a big family one day. And you find out from going to the doctor after trying for so long that you're dealing with fertility issues and you can't have children. You can grieve that loss of a dream that you had. You can also grieve, for example, if you're dealing with someone who is dealing with Alzheimer's, your parents, you might have known them to be this way for all your life, and all of a sudden they're no longer the person you knew, and you're grieving the loss of that experience.
So it's not necessarily the person has deceased. It could be something living still that's causing grief.
Exactly. I'm experiencing that firsthand with my dad. He's struggling with his memory right now. And I didn't know what was happening with me, but I found myself having conversations with my dad and saying, wow, I'm so sad right now because he's still alive, and people might come and be like, oh, well, he's still here, and I'm happy he's still here. But I also know that this was like, my dad who had it all together, who was super sharp. This is my dad here, right? And he's no longer the person who I knew. So I'm grieving that particular loss of that person and accepting the new, and still loving him, but is letting go of what I loved before and loving him in this new space. You can grieve the loss of, for example, if you lose a limb, or you lose some functionality that you once had. This is a new reality for you. And so there's different things that can cause grief for you, but anything that you love, that you were attached to, that you treasured, you can grieve that loss. And when we mourn, when we express that grief publicly. So when I'm crying, when I am doing like having a funeral service or whatever, that's public mourning. But grief is what we're dealing with inside.
So mourning is more external. Grief is what we deal on the inside. If I may, because I was reading your wonderful book, my sister came this weekend and I popped it right on her bed so she can read it. She was like, who wrote that? I said, that's Jocelyn Jones. So she actually packed your book in her. I said, where's the book? She said, I packed it. I said, nigga, that wasn't for you to take. That was for you to read while you write up in him. So anyway, I got my book back, so I got to buy another one for my sister. But I want to read something. I'm getting older now, so I got to put on my glasses to read the back print. It says, first of all, the book is Breaking the Power of the Mask by Jocelyn Jones. First of all, where can they find your book? Where can they find it?
They can visit my ministry website, faithonthejourney.org.
Okay.
Again, that's faithonthejourney.org. And you can find everything you need to know about the book there.
Okay, perfect. So what I want to do, I want to read the back, and it was so meaty. I just want to ask some questions, if that's okay. It says, since childhood, each of us have been trained in the art of wearing a mask to prevent people from seeing what's really going on inside. However, what is hidden in the dark will eventually come to light. Emotions like shame, anger, abandonment often lie beneath the mask, have power to keep us in bondage. So my first question is, how then do these emotions like shame, anger, abandonment, how do those emotions keep us in bondage?
Well, because so it's really what we believe about certain situations and how we interpret it. And oftentimes there's certain things that happen to us and they're painful, but we bury them because we're a pain avoiding culture. That's what we do. We're taught from childhood that looking or being perceived as being happy is healthy and sad is bad. We're taught that pain is a bad thing. Feel good, that's good. And so we do anything we can to avoid pain, hence medication, overeating, shopping, all these different things, the mask. So we're trained in childbirth, since childhood, to wear this mask to prevent us from feeling what we feel. But the problem is when something traumatic happens in our life, or it doesn't even have to be trauma, it could be just something that's painful. Our body still remembers that. Our subconscious still remembers that. But because we're pain averse, we choose to say, okay, I'm not going to deal with this right now, but the wound is still there. The wound is still there. And just like a physical wound that you might experience, if you have an open wound that is dirty and you have all this stuff going on in there, if you don't treat it and you go with the whole time heals all wounds, what's going to happen to that open wound?
Right.
It's going to get infected. We know this, right? The same thing happens to us in the emotional sense, because we have a lot of people walking around infected with undealt with wounds. And because of that, we see the infection of bitterness, we see resentment, we see self-esteem issues, all these things that are coming out of that's keeping us in bondage and preventing us from experiencing things that God wants to experience. And I'm speaking from a faith-based standpoint here. But when it comes to these issues, the unfortunate thing, it can keep us in bondage and we don't even realize it. I call it invisible handcuffs, because there's things that might happen when you're young, and say, for instance, your parents left you, walked out on you, and abandonment issues, right? And you never even had a chance to deal with that because your parent, the one who stayed, might say, okay, now, DB, you're the man of the house. And so there's this pressure for you now to step into a role that you never were meant to be in because you're a child, and you don't even have a chance to grieve the fact that your parent walked out on you. And so you have that there, you have these abandonment issues, but you can't deal with it because now I have to function, I have to step into this role. And so I just grow up having this thing on the side here that's going to forever say, oh, I wasn't good enough. I was the reason why, my parent left. You have these thoughts in your head that were never addressed. And so that can cause later down the road issues with intimacy. It could be issues with trust issues. It could be a whole bunch of issues that you never realized was based on something that happened to you in childhood. And so this is why we have to remove the mask and find spaces in which we can have these honest dialogues about what's going on and say, you know what, I'm not okay. And we don't have a society that allows us to say, I'm not okay right now. I'm hurting. We've been literally trained to suppress our emotions to the point where if we feel like we're about to cry, we find ourselves saying, oh, I'm sorry. And we're apologizing for something that's natural. Right. Because we've been trained that our emotions are bad, feelings are bad, feeling pain is bad. I'm not above that myself, because I had a conversation with you earlier this week when I was feeling some uncomfortable emotions. And I was like, nope, not gonna feel it. And we protest that. But those feelings are signs that something is there that needs to be addressed. It's a signal. Yeah. I'm not saying something is there. Let's explore this right now.
So time out. Where do people get the skill set? Because I agree with everything you're saying, that when we get hurt, the little boy fall down, boy, get up, brush it off. It's okay. We're never allowed the safe space to truly feel, to be hurt, to be pain. I've heard Les Brown say years ago, 80% of the people don't care and 20% glad it's you. So that's like 100% of the people who really don't give a fried chicken what you're going through. So then in this world, in this society that's completely focused on itself, not you, how do people stop to find the tools to even know? Because when you say mask, I'm also thinking of the word representative. I've heard people say many people bring representative to the relationship. So then how do people discover this? Because I can imagine even in being single and dating, it has to show up in very uninteresting ways.
It does. You said the skill set. I think it starts with being informed, and sometimes you just got to be told it's okay to take this off. This is what you're doing. Let's take it off for a second. And it's so uncomfortable because we've been walking around so long pretending to be. It's a pressure. It's honestly a pressure. Like I personal experience. I know my whole childhood, people will call me Mama J. They looked up to me. And there was this whole spirit of perfectionism that I felt like I had to live up to, and then there's this culture of you have to be strong, in the Black community, you often hear strong Black woman, right? And so this, you live up to this persona and you feel like I can't let people down. So I remember one time I was having a breakdown because it got to be too much. And when I was crying in front of one of my girlfriends, she said, "You know what, Jocelyn, this is like, I don't like seeing you in this pain, but this makes you seem like you're human." And
versus what?
Versus this Miss America, no offense to Miss America, but like this like perfect persona that's unreachable in life. Cause like no one's perfect. And sometimes you're no longer relatable. And that's the thing, people, because I'm wearing my mask and you wearing your mask, we feel like, well, I can't let you see me over here struggling. Even though I'm on a struggle bus and you on a struggle bus, nobody knows, right? And so I think having conversations around saying, okay, we're going to be real up in here. Like when we have workshops and retreats or seminars and saying, you don't have to do this all the time. And I'm not telling people who are watching right now that you tell everybody all your business.
Yeah, we know better than that.
We don't want that. But we all need spaces where we can be authentically ourselves and take it off. Correct. It's hot, it's heavy. You can't be carrying this around your whole life, because when you are at a place where you're wearing this mask, you don't allow people to be able to fully love you as you are, right? You might protect yourself from being hurt, but at the same time, you'll never really experience the true love because no one really knows you. They never have a chance to know you. So it prevents intimacy when we walk around wearing this mask. And it frankly prevents you from really healing because you've never dealt with what is behind there.
So let me ask you this question. You mentioned the strong woman, the strong Black woman. Our research shows that 49% of Black males die of cardiovascular disease. I'm sorry, not 49%. Black males die of cardiovascular disease, heart attack, at a rate that's 49% higher than their white male counterpart. Black women die of cardiovascular disease at a rate that's 69% higher than their counterpart, which tells me that, and I grew up with the strong Black woman, father left, had to take care of everything, had to work 3 jobs. You never saw her cry, but sometimes you did, but just always strong. Are the sisters and are our people carrying too much weight and too much burden on our shoulder that's literally killing us? And then there's a second part to that question, because during the coronavirus, it's been said that we're dying at a disproportionate rate. And when I was doing my research on police and community, it's showing that stress, anxiety, many of these different maladies that's affecting our people is also showing up in the emergency room, which is causing us to die at a higher rate because we're not taking care of ourselves. We're holding on to stress. We're angry, we're mean, we're mad, and we're not releasing anything. Do you think that has something to do with our increased heart attack rate because of the mask, or do you think it has nothing to do with it? And if so, let's jump right into some solutions, because if we're dying like this, I would have to assume we can prevent some of this drama that's going on.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. But yes, I do. I know that the stress that we deal with in our communities, when you're dealing with chronic problems, you're not just talking about okay, I had a bad day. But you're dealing with, okay, we got violence in our communities, we got systemic poverty, we have all these other factors. You might be raising children on your own, whatever the case may be. When you have all these factors in place where you're chronically stressed, it affects your body in so many different ways where they might not be able to find something that's specifically wrong with you, but you literally might be having symptoms of someone who is then you're having a heart attack or stroke or whatever, because it's physically affecting you. And then there's trauma that we have to realize is a factor in this as well, because when you have been exposed to trauma on a regular basis, we talk about PTSD. I mean, we got present traumatic stress.
Yeah.
Like,
give me some examples of trauma, because I honestly think sometimes people are in trauma so much and so long, they don't even know that they're in trauma. So give me some examples of trauma for the audience.
I would say if you're going through your community, driving down the block, and you are at a place where you're constantly like this on the steering wheel, you're holding the steering wheel, you're looking like to your right, to your left, afraid that you're going to get shot, looking like got a mean mug, somebody going down the street, because you're always on high alert. You're always on fight or flight mode, is what I'm speaking of in terms of that. So we got the violence. We got the fact that we can have secondary trauma. All right, so let's even talk about that as being an African-American woman and you being an African-American man here. And we saw what happened with George Floyd. That scene of seeing him being on the ground with a police officer on his neck, that causes secondary trauma where I'm sitting here, that's burnt into my memory. So when you don't even have to experience the trauma yourself, but you see someone who's going through something traumatic and that affects you, and so it's so many different things that can take place that's traumatic, and trauma is subjective. So just because it might not be traumatic to you, it could be traumatic to someone else. But anytime something, I would say it's safe to say, if it's violent, that is traumatic. If it might be what you consider to be out of order, abrupt, to see your child pass away, and you're like, wait, I was supposed to go before you. That can cause trauma for someone. And so there's different things that can take place. And those stressors, if they're never dealt with, if we just go straight into, I don't have time to deal with this mode, and you never deal with it, your body, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. It's an excellent book.
What's the name of it?
Called The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, wow.
And it talks about how literally your body, you might think that you haven't dealt with, you don't need to deal with it, but your body is going to say, oh no, we remember all of this. And so instead of, you being able to, like, say for instance, you think you're okay going to the grocery store, but if something happened to you that reminds you of that particular scene, whether it was a smell that takes you back to something that was traumatic, whether it was something that like somebody looks like something, whatever, it could be something that triggers you. Your subconscious goes off and sends you straight into fight or flight mode. And then you're reliving that experience in real time as if it's happening right this second, because your body, it remembers the trauma. So your body actually does keep the score of what's going on. And that stress can literally kill you, which goes to your question, right? And then I think you had an initial question about us being strong and how that affects us.
Being too strong, and I'm not going to let anything bother me, and I won't emote. I won't share my feelings. I won't feel it. So I'm holding everything inside.
That I want to speak to that from a faith perspective for a quick second, because I think the church does play a role in this. When it comes to our community, oftentimes we talk about, have faith. You don't have enough faith if you feel this way about a certain situation. And we're never allowed the space to be like, I'm struggling, And so because of that, going to the whole mask thing, we have this idea that, God won't give me more than I can bear. And I need to speak to this because there's the scripture in this Bible that we study and we love. People misquote, right? They say, this is the scripture that I'm referring to is 1 Corinthians 10:13. That's specifically speaking to God won't give me a temptation that I won't be able to find a way out. However, people misquote that as if it's saying that God won't give you more than you can bear, when that's not the reality. Sometimes there's stuff that we can't bear. We cannot. It's too much for us to carry on our own, but we feel as if we have to be strong. And because of that, we don't allow ourselves to space to say, I need help carrying this weight. You know, obviously, I believe that God can give us the strength to get through, but sometimes we need others. God gave us other people to help us carry this load that we're not meant to carry by ourselves. And so I think it's also if unhealthy theology that people have that contributes to the problem, even when it comes to grief, you know, the topic that we're talking about. People try to make it where is faith and mourning are mutually exclusive. You know, well, if they're in a
absolutely. If you have faith, then you wouldn't be fearful. If you have faith, you won't be hurting or stuff like that.
Exactly. Well, they're in a better place. We hit people with a lot of platitudes. We're trying to help them, right? But we're not allowing them the space to be able to say, I understand that my dad or whoever is 90 years old and lived a good life, but I still miss them. And I have the right to miss them. Even though I believe they're in heaven, I still have the right to grieve. And so instead of allowing people that space, we try to make them feel better right away and hit them with those platitudes of God needed another angel or whatever the case may be. And people really don't need that when we're struggling, and they need people to be able to sit with them in the pain. And we don't know how to do that for people.
Let me ask you this question. I agree. I think people don't know how to sit with other people in the pain because they haven't dealt with their own pain. And dealing with your pain, it's like, I got my own that I'm not even dealing with. So then how does one really comfort someone who is grieving? How does someone who is grieving allow other people to comfort them? Because it seems like it's probably, you know, 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. I don't know how to comfort you, and I don't know how to ask to be comforted. So now I don't, you know, reach out to you, but then I'm gonna get mad because you didn't reach out to me. So it sounds like it's kind of
really
crazy.
difficult. It's very difficult. I mean, I'm still trying to grow in this area, to be honest, because it's such a sensitive subject. I've read books about this that said we're grief illiterate. Like we really don't.
Grief illiterate.
Grief illiterate. We don't even know where to start when it comes to this thing. And because of that, people are like, well, I don't want to say the wrong thing. So you know what? I'm not going to say anything at all. And then so you know that before you know it, someone might get like cards in the mail for like the first week or so, text messages. And after that, people are expected by culture to be back to normal. And it's not the case. They still crying themselves to sleep. They still feel that pain, right? And so I think it is a difficult balance because the person who's grieving probably is dealing with the struggle of, I don't want to be a burden for other people. And so because of that, they don't reach out. They just try to deal with it on their own, but they need the support, right? And then other people on the outside, they're grief illiterate. They want to help. They don't know what to do. So they just rather say, well, let's just not talk about it. And then we have this whole circle of whatever we got going on here. And so I think that this is when I really want to, and we'll talk about this at the end, finding a grief companion is something that people can do. You don't have to have a whole lot of people.
What is a grief companion?
A grief companion is someone who can just be present with you, who is okay with being present with you in your suffering. Because some people can. They can acknowledge and they're okay with just sitting with you, like, you know, in the silence while you cry, the ugly cry, and not be moved by it, not trying to just cheer you up all of a sudden, but saying, I'm here. I'm here. Okay. Are you eating? All right. Let me get you some food. You know, like, you know, let's make sure you got your basic functions. Oh, you don't eat. Don't even worry about that. Whatever you need, and not trying to rush them through the process, because that's the thing. We try to put a timeline to grief. We try to, like, we're wired like this to have frameworks for everything. Grief is not linear. It doesn't work like that. There's no, even though there's Elizabeth Ross came out with the 5 stages of grief. Not everybody goes through these 5 stages like this. You might go through one. So it's not like that. And people try to push people to the other side of acceptance and feeling good again. No, let them go at their own pace. People don't need to be told how to grieve, you know? And so allowing people that ability to cry with you, to share stories with you, be open about when they're having a bad day, and feel like they're not a burden to you when they do share, that's a starting place. But again, going back to your question about grief companion, not everybody's there. Some people can love you There could be family members and friends who care about you and say some stuff that is just off and can mess you up. So there are people, however, who do this type of work that I would suggest someone kind of connects with.
So then I'm definitely hearing not everybody is a grief companion. if you're critical, if you're always trying to find a solution, if you have an inability to listen to the problem without giving your extra 2 cents that's usually off anyway, then chances are you probably are not a grief companion. Is that accurate?
That is.
Even though you can have a good heart, even though you can love the person, even though you can care about the person and want the best for the person, it don't mean you're a good grief companion.
Let me speak to this. You can become one, right? Like you can.
Okay, how? Because I got somebody in mind that needs to learn how to be a grief companion. How?
I think this is the education of it all, because going to what you just said, grief is not something that needs to be fixed. Like you're not ill because you're grieving. You know, and that's something that we have to teach people. I'm gonna do a quick aside because I know a good girlfriend of mine, she was sharing her story of grief, and she was dealing with all these emotions and feelings in her body that she was unfamiliar with. She was like, I can't focus, I can't think straight, I can't sleep, I can't, in all these different things.
Now, was it due to like Corona or was it mental
loss?
I'm trying, because we got different people.
Sorry, there's so much stuff going on. Yeah, it was due to a recent loss, like a very difficult loss that she had of a sibling. And because of that, you know, she was dealing with all these dynamics where she just never felt this way before. And the doctors were suggesting medication for her. And disclosure, I'm not saying that medication's bad. I'm not saying that.
It's not the first all the time.
Right. I think that sometimes we go there so quickly. And I'm like, sis, nothing. I don't think that there's something like wrong with you. And I'm saying this with quotes because we're quick to try to, you know, put people in categories. You're grieving. Everything that you just described to me is natural to grief. You don't need to be fixed. And so with that being said, we always like to fix things. Like a lot of us are problem solvers. And this is something that those problem solvers in the world, we can't fix this. We can't like do something to give you a magic pill to make you feel better and have your pain go away. No, this person, what we can do for them is say, I am here for you. You are not a burden. I see you. And I'm not going to even say I understand, because I don't understand your pain. You know, because a lot of times we like to compare our grief stories. And that's not the thing to do. When someone's hurting right now, even if you had a similar experience that led to the loss of someone, there might be components that you get, but this needs to be about them. This needs to be about you listening to them. This needs to be about, you know, letting them know that they have a safe space and that they can trust you not to go out and tell everybody, oh, she a hot mess right now. Like, you know, like people do that.
Yeah.
And so that's someone who can, those are a couple things that you can do to help people to journey through this wilderness of grief.
Okay, so time out. You just made me realize I am not a good grief partner, because I am always trying to go to the solution. And my family would tell you, DB is not the sensitive one. He's the one that you go to if you want to get to the solution, if you want to think about different options and you want to get it done. But even my brother told me, you ain't very sensitive, are you, dude? I'm like, sometimes sensitivity is overrated. But then, so I just learned that I don't have to fix it.
You don't.
I don't have to fix it. If I care about you, I don't have to put a timeline on it too, because sometimes I have said, how long are you going to be grieving? Or how long are you going to be sad? Right. So that's a mistake.
Right. Yeah. And the timeline, here's the thing. It's like, you think about it. If someone, there's 2 points I want to make. To your point, there's no timeline, so to speak, because if someone loses something that they truly cherished, if I lose, you know, my parents, or if someone loses a child or something, I'm going to always love them. So let's think back to what we talked about when we define grief. Grief is an expression of the love that I have. So if I loved, I'm going to experience grief for that loss, right? And so with that, our love for that person doesn't evaporate. So we have to look at it now. Our relationship, the love I have for them is going to be different, because they're going to always be a part of me. So even if, for example, someone loses a spouse that they loved, to say it's time to move on is a hurtful thing, because in a sense, I know people are trying to get them to, to maybe experience love again, and they can, but that person will always have a place in their heart. And for them, if you're saying move on, what you're really saying is forget that piece of them, right? And that's something that is not fair to anyone. So yes, they have to come to terms with it. It's going to be a new normal, but that person is going to always play an important role in that space. That love is not lost. So they have to learn to move forward in some type of way to this new normal. But let's not push someone through to the point where they aren't allowed that space to remember what they loved and lost.
And then is it true then too that the person who's grieving have to also remember that even though this person may be lost, that the love, the memories that they have will also still be there? Because it seems like to me, maybe a part of that grief, and I could be way off, seems like a part of that grief is because I think I am losing this person and everything it meant to me, or am I off with that?
Right. I think the relationship changes, because if I, especially for us as a Christian woman, if I believe that, this person, the spirit is still here, I'm going to still have that conversation with that person. Is a different thing. I'm still holding, like you said, to the memories. Whatever you hold on to is a different relationship and how you express that love. But I've seen people in their process of moving forward, they've done things to honor that love and express that love to that person when they're no longer here in the physical form. Whether it's starting a foundation to always remember and live, help that legacy to move on, or running races, or doing something that's proactive to honor that love. So there's ways that people can express that love in different ways for the person that they will always have love for.
So you're saying you can even channel that grief, that loss, into a powerful way of remembrance, a run or thing. Because I know people who've done charity events or runs in honor of someone. So then that's like a help them to relieve the grief, or to at least move beyond.
It's an expression. It's a way to help them to create some meaning. And I'm hesitant in saying this because sometimes there is no explanation as to why. Right. But we always, as humans, want to know why. And sometimes we find meaning in that loss when we're able to channel that into something that's helping to save other lives or helping to prevent. So a woman who I wrote about in my book, she lost her sister to, I think it was heart disease. And so because of that, she did everything in her power to start getting into shape and to start raising awareness about heart disease so other people wouldn't go through the same loss as she has. And now she's also helping other people who lost their siblings. So for her, it doesn't take away the sting of the loss per se. Like, she'll always miss her sister, but that meaning gives her the strength to continue to move forward, because she says, okay, there's a bigger picture here, and I am able to make a difference, And so I say that again hesitantly, because I think that people feel like they're just supposed to get over. And I don't think in certain cases you can get over, but you are able to find a way through so that you can experience healing, in a sense of experiencing other emotions and allowing yourself to experience joy, love, hope again. And so that's where I define healing, because healing is not I'm over it. Healing is I'm allowing myself to still experience all the beautiful things that life has to offer, even though that part of me I still grieve it. I still miss it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. So one day, it was probably at least maybe a couple of months ago, and I was watching the news and they were talking about the COVID rate, because I do not watch the news every day because of that. And they were talking about so many deaths and things are soaring. And I literally went to my room and just boo-hooed. I didn't know one of those people who were dying. And I think it was even overseas at the time. And I'm like, what the hell? Why am I sitting here it's like I lost the people myself, yeah. And I just, so are we that connected as a people that we can feel pain for someone we don't even know, that's in a different race, that's in a different country, or is grief, or should grief be just kind of confined to the people we know?
We are all connected. And that's one thing I appreciate. One thing I could say about COVID-19. It showed how connected we really are, you know, and if we see the humanity in other people, I don't care if they're across the world, you know, someone being locked in prison camps or whatever, that's still a human being. I see the humanity in you. And because of that, yes, I will grieve when I see something tragic or wrong happen to you, because I can see that as my brother or sister who that is happening to. So going back to what I said earlier about, you know, the secondary trauma, yes, like there could be certain things that happens where we grieve the loss of what's happening. We can grieve the injustice that we see in this country, because we know it's wrong. And so there's certain things that we see that affects us indirectly, and we do need to allow ourselves the space to sit with those emotions and do mourn over those things that should not take place, that aren't right.
Right. So let me ask you this question. You mentioned earlier with George Floyd, and I'm wondering, did people see, because I still to this day would not allow myself to watch the 8 minutes and 46 seconds of that, because I honestly, sincerely believe something inside of me would never be the same again. And I even heard TD Jakes. It was my first time really hearing him about to cry. He was like, when I saw it, you know, he was saying how it made him feel. And I was like, whoa. So is that what made, 60 countries demonstrating for a man they do not know? Every state in America, thousands of cities demonstrating, protesting, burning police departments down for a man that they did not know. So is that level of connection that you're talking about? Is that level of, we should not be seeing an innocent man handcuffed on the ground and literally being murdered? How do we reckon with something like that and that level of trauma that it causes?
Yeah, D, I think it did show how connected we are, because for the longest, when it comes to some of these issues with police brutality, I felt like the African American community often felt like we were just alone in this.
Absolutely felt that way.
And so to see that it was a global response, that was finally like, yes, we finally see like this. We are just like, you know, George Floyd, he could have been my uncle, he could have been my brother, he could, you know, whatever, he could have been my dad. We have to start looking at people like that, you know, because that's when the compassion happens. And we have to get to the point where we're not so much in our own bubble and we allow ourselves to feel. I'm preaching to myself right now, because at the same time, to your point, D, this stuff could be so overwhelming that you're like, I can't take it because it's too much. So it's a balance between allowing ourselves to encounter the pain and then pushing away, because we do have to balance that, because it can get to the point where it's so overwhelming, to the point where we can't take it anymore. And we're find ourselves where we just can't function. Same thing going back to the topic of grief. When someone's grieving, you can't just stay in a place where you're just grieving full throttle all at the same time. Like, you have to encounter the pain and pull away from the pain, you know, to allow that healthy balance, because it can be overwhelming. But yes, like that, I think this was a perfect example to say that we have to start seeing each other as human. Let's drop the mask. Let's deal with our emotions, and, you know, and be real with each other.
So let me ask you this. Do you think racism is a mask? And if so, what kind of mask is it?
Woo, yes. That's a good question. I think so. I think that the whole idea of, well, first, race is a social, you know, construct, right? So it was made up by man to try to have it where one is better than the other, right? So we made up this thing, which I remember last week, one of the people on your panel was talking about how in other countries, they're like, what are you talking about? Describing race seems foreign, but it's this idea of one being better than the other, when that's completely false. And that's, again, projection of power over someone, right? And so when I talk about the mask, I talk about power and control is one of the masks that people tend to wear to project that I have authority, I'm better than you, whether it's a perfectionist, whether it's, like you said, racism and controlling people. We do that so that we can have the edge over other people. And so, yes, I do think
but what if you grow up in that culture? You grow up, your great granddaddy taught your granddaddy taught your mother and father your mother and father teach you that, you know, we are superior, we are better than them because that. And that's literally a part, I hate to say DNA, but that's a part of your makeup. Yeah.
That's what we're dealing with.
How do you move past that mask?
Well, I feel like most of us have been living in the matrix our entire life. Even like I attended this workshop not too long ago where it talks about how we're all swimming in the pool or the ocean of white supremacy. And because of that, it doesn't matter if you are Black, Latina, white, we all have certain things that we have accepted as being the truth when it comes to these systemic issues about ourselves, whether it comes to our hair, when it comes to our education, when it comes to how our body looks. We're trying to conform to what is considered to be the norm. Like everything in our society tries to make something better than the other. The norm, we base everything that we do based off this norm. So there's norm for grieving, there's norm for how you're supposed to look. And if you're different's bad, norm is good. And so because of that, everyone's trying to wear this mask to pretend like they're the norm, when in reality, that's not you. And what you are is beautiful, is powerful, is immaculate. But you were never told that. You were told that you were dirty. You were told that you were wrong. And because you were not the normal, that was a social construct that we put in place, all of a sudden now you're trying to make yourself what you're not. Hence, we got what we got going on right now, and have a whole lot of people perpetrating, not happy, chasing after things that they don't even really want for themselves, but we're chasing after this imaginary dream of what normal is. And so that's a little tangent. You took me there, but yeah,
it's not a tangent. It's right on point. As a matter of fact, it must be on point because Brother Jeff just came in. So that means he got some questions. So you must be getting people excited. What's going on, Jeff?
How's it going, DB? This is a phenomenal conversation. Jocelyn Jones, you are amazing. I am so much. And we have the comments section on DB's Facebook is jumping, right? All right. So most of the comments are, they're not questions, it's people either saying they agree, and we have one individual say they disagree with the point that was said. But if you would allow me, Orlandis Thomas, this person has been extremely active throughout the entire conversation. So he said emotions are attached to events. We aren't taught to allow the emotion to flow. Too many people hear the term suck it up when we express those emotions, leading to her point on bondage. Orlandis Thomas went on to say, men are worse because we are taught to compartmentalize. And I'll say
just gonna ask that.
Yep. I'll say
go ahead, Orlandis. He's out of Chicago too.
Out of Chicago. So Orlandis agrees with you. She says she's speaking truth. We have to become okay with being vulnerable and transparent with all of our emotions, and be aware and embrace them as they pass through us. All right. And so those are some statements. I don't know if you want to comment on it before I share some more comments people left and questions.
No, I mean, he was right on point. All the comments you made, I agree with. And I do think that there are gender roles when it comes to grief and some of the issues that we deal with that we have to deconstruct. And this is what we're dealing with right now, from what's happening in the world right now to what's even happening when it comes to grief. There's certain things that we have been taught that we literally have to just deconstruct that and say, nope, I'm sorry, that wasn't true. I know that your daddy taught you that, or your mama might have told you that, or everyone else in your church might have taught you that, but that's not the reality. And so having that conversation, I think it's a shock at first for some people. Some people might be resistant to it, but then other people might feel relieved because it's a pressure off of them that I no longer have to be this thing that everybody's telling me to be. So I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah. Hey, you got something else? Because I wanted to read something else. What you got?
Yeah, so I got something else from Harriet Tubman.
I see Harriet Tubman. Look like she's freeing the slave. She's trying to free Jocelyn over here.
Yeah, she's combating.
Yeah.
That was presented. So Harriet Tubman said, I do not agree. She said there are microsystems, nanosystems in the transformation theory on connectivity, not accurate in her assessment. So what is your response, Ms. Jocelyn Jones?
And also I want to ask Harriet, what does she mean? Because when I read that, it seems like I'm missing a connection or something. So I kind of want to ask her for a little bit more information.
Yeah, I would love for some clarity on her question. Is it a question that she was asking?
No, it's more of a statement.
More of a statement.
Okay.
So
Okay.
hopefully, you know what, let's give her a moment to come in. Do you have something else, Noel? Because if not, I have a thing I want to ask JJ.
Okay, we have a statement from Ellie Davis, and I'll end with this. So Ellie Davis said, "It's honoring the love and legacy of the loved one that has lost." And this person said, "I play tennis every year on Paul's birthday because that's how he started his birthday."
And let me say this, Ella Davis is an amazing, wonderful soul. She married, and shortly after she got married, her husband passed away. And it's like, whoa, I can't imagine that level of grief that anyone would have. So that goes back to what you were saying earlier, to do something to honor that particular person. Are there particular things you do, or you just kind of do something that they may have liked so that you can kind of experience the love, or how do you do that?
You know what? That's something, D, I would never, I can give you examples, but this goes back to what I said before. There's no normal way to grieve. And people have, people are often told how to do everything. But when it comes to this, there are certain things that we can do to accompany people in this process. And there are things that people can do that could be self-destructive, which I can talk about in a second. But when it comes to their expression, it could be like whether, dance, it could be, lament, like it could be so many different things that people can do is what I'm saying. And so I think that's beautiful that she does that as an annual event. And I think that's a great expression of her love.
Shout out, Ella. Hey, so let me ask you this. Orlando's mentioned something very powerful. He said men are worse. Why are men, and I do think I agree with that. Why are men worse in terms of grieving and moving past it? Because men, it seems like we carry our hurt like a way long time, more so than women. And then we kind of try to mask it where it makes us harder, but it's not really the truth. Why is that?
Yeah, I honestly think it depends on the person, but I do realize there's certain social pressures that you experience that I might not experience as a woman. Granted, I still might find myself apologizing for crying, but for men, like I know men who are literally taught, don't you cry, suck it up, get it together. So like this is more common for men to experience these social pressures, which cause you to say, I need to backseat how I feel right now and not express. Now, just because you don't express your emotions does not mean you don't feel them. So some men, they might just be more reserved and still allow themselves to feel and mourn. However, some have been just taught to just shut those emotions down. And if you're taught that early, that's going to go throughout your life. But that's going to be an issue for you because those experiences will still show up in different ways.
What are some of those issues, like at work, in a relationship, maybe with your children? That's how you teach your sons, your daughters?
Yeah, like I use an example of like a pressure cooker. You have all these stressors and things going on, and like it's pressure building, and you're just trying to suppress and then eventually it can explode in ways that you don't even intend to. Like it could be anger that comes out. It can be like going into rage, control, jealousy, insecurities, all these different things. You don't realize where it's coming from, but all these stressors have built up over time, and eventually it's going to either come out on someone else or implode on you, where you're dealing with certain things like depression and anxiety, going back to the whole thing, I can't sleep, all these things that are physically happening with you. You don't even realize this could be the result of things that you just suppressed a long time ago.
So the inability to sleep could be something you're holding on to. What are some other signs of grief?
So fragmented thinking.
What is that?
So like, for example, if you are at work and you're usually someone who's sharp, like you can knock things out and you're just like, I can't think right now. I can't seem to get my thoughts together. That can be something where you're struggling with grief. It could be something where you are not depression, and that's something that can happen. It doesn't have to be grief, but sometimes people find themselves where they can't do the day-to-day functioning. And, that's something is a natural response, right, to feeling something that you lost. So we might see people being depressed. Some people, they might go the avoidance route and find themselves saying, okay, I'm gonna stay busy. I'm gonna work 15 hours. and not deal with this, or I'm going to go shopping because this makes me feel good, or I'm just going to eat, comfort foods and eat like crazy. So a lot of times people, you might see them gain a lot of weight because, they're grieving, or they might lose a lot of weight. So again, there's different things that people do to try their best to cope, and people are honestly just trying their best, but sometimes in doing that, they might do some things that are harmful to themselves in that attempt. So then you start getting into substance abuse and drinking and making rash decisions that can either harm them or others because they're trying to feel, and so this is when, again, when we recognize this and understand that this person is hurting, how can I accompany them in this process and be there for them and get them the additional support they need? Because ultimately, I don't think that anyone, this is my personal opinion, it's, not textbook here, that I don't believe anyone should go through this grief journey alone, right? And we need, a space where we can have other people to kind of help us when we feel weary to move forward. And I challenge the church to do a better job in this. Because again, going back to what I said earlier, we're big on, like, we're celebrating life. And yes, we celebrate that person's life. No, we do. Like, I get that. However, like, this person still, if it's a death, if you will, this person still experienced a major loss. Let's acknowledge that. That's one thing that when I went to seminary school, we talked about, let's acknowledge the pain. Can we stop acting like, everything is just gumdrops and roses? Let's be there for this person. And if this person had experienced what would be traumatic grief, for example, if it was a suicide or gun violence or whatever, we have a whole nother element, because this person's not only dealing with the grief from losing the person, but they also have the grief associated with the trauma of this experience being a traumatic event that took place. And so we have to be at a place where we as a church have resources in place to not just say, I'm going to pray for you. Yes, pray for me, but I need additional support other than just prayer right now, because I don't even know how to cook. I don't even know how to put toast in the oven right now because I can't function, so help me, and that's where people are. And so being proactive enough to check on people beyond the 2 weeks that we're accustomed to allowing people to grieve, and saying, it's been 3 weeks, it's been 3 months, it's an anniversary. This is probably a difficult time for this person. They need someone to check on them. It's a holiday, Thanksgiving. This is their first Thanksgiving without their loved one, their first Mother's Day without their mother, whatever. Kind of keep that in mind so that people know, I see you. And that person who's grieving does not always have to be the person to reach out for that support, because half the time they don't even have the strength to do so. And so keeping that in mind for those we love is important.
Jefferson!
Man, that was really powerful because a couple years ago, my grandfather passed away, and my mom, she grieved for a very long time. I remember months after his death, she was wearing black every single day to work, to church, to the grocery store. And I remember thinking, my grandfather died on my birthday on August 6th, and it was still November, and my mom was still wearing black. And I'm thinking, it's been 3 months. Like the cycle of grief should have passed already. And I think your words are so powerful because it's helping to give me more clarity on and understanding on how people grieve differently. And so
let me ask you a question, Noel, before you ask your question. So knowing what you just learned and heard, would you have done something differently in relationship to your mother, the way she was grieving, or do you think you handled it okay?
I don't think I handled it well because I didn't really understand the concept of grieving past the graveyard. After you bury the person, I hear people go back to the person's grave once a year, but I never thought of someone just, completely laying it all out for the next couple of months. So I think I could have been a lot more supportive, especially with what Ms. Jones said about this is the first Thanksgiving without him. This is the first Christmas without him. Like I never really took that into account. I just, August 6th, he passed away. August 20th, he was buried. And I thought that was the end of it, but I definitely could have.
And that was your mother's father?
My mother's father, yes. So I definitely could have been with her more to at least hear what hear how she felt about the situation. I could have been more of a listening ear as opposed to just thinking, why is she wearing black all the time? Yeah.
I'm not laughing at your brother. I'm laughing at you. So.
No. I know.
That's interesting because one thing that I'm hearing too is that we have to be a lot more empathetic to other people and to their needs and maybe to their concerns. And maybe we know we don't have the skill set. Maybe it's just like, hey, I just want to check in. Do you need me to go to, if you're a doer, do you need me to go get something from the grocery store? Do you need me to pick something up? Do you need me to mail something to you? So that way, at least if you're that do kind of person, you're still able to do it, but you're giving them that time, that extra space. But because we all have needs, we all need water, we all need food and things of that nature. And maybe you can be an asset to that person in that way. What do you have for us, Jefferson?
All right. So we have a story from David L. Cole.
DC.
Yes, sir. He's definitely a friend of Conversations with DB. He was very open and transparent in his message.
Wow.
He said, as a man who lost his marriage, career position, and beloved mother in the same season, I can attest that I didn't feel that I could open up the loss.
For us, Jefferson.
All right, so we have a story from David L. Cole. Because one expects men to man up. And he said, my health was forfeit and only therapy and learning to open up help. And he said, Dr. Jones is speaking the truth. And we have some other comments from Ellie Davis and Novus D. Johnson. This person said,
yay.
Yes. What a great conversation. It really is okay to be human. And your okay might be different from my okay. And she said, awesome and thanks. Ellie Davis said, it's important to know there is no cycle to grief. We grieve all kinds of losses, jobs, relationships, people, and even things. Each person is going to experience it differently.
Yes.
So a lot of great comments of agreements and letting you know their story and attesting to everything you just said.
Yeah. That's neat. I know my mom growing up, she would always tell my brother and I, it's okay to cry. Because the gentleman she was dating was like, y'all men, you can't sit around here crying. Don't be teaching your sons to be crying. They're going to be whips. And she was like, listen. And I was always thankful that she allowed us that space that if we were hurt to cry, if we needed to say something versus try to bottle that up. So I cannot imagine being a grown man who was taught all my life that you cannot feel, you cannot emote, you don't have certain feelings, or if you do, you're a sissy or whatever it is that come with being so much man that you can't feel. How destructive is that, Jocelyn? Because there may be men watching or listening or even wives or girlfriends of men who act that way. How destructive is that? And can you share that so that they can at least be able to maybe even love on that man better so that he can change his ways?
Yes, we got to break it. We got to. And I feel like it's something, it definitely hits the men hard, but it hits women hard as well. You heard me say it so many times. I've apologized for crying because we're told that it's inappropriate. And so I think just even this conversation right here, if you're listening right now and you have some things going on in your life that you buried, you have some grief that you've never allowed yourself to grieve, the grief does not go away. Grief has to be welcomed. Right. And so it's still going to be there. And finding someone who we talked about, not the fixer in your life, but someone who's willing to listen so that you can remove the mask, be authentically you, cry, do the ugly cry, even maybe you don't cry. And some people just honestly, that's not their temperament. And I'm not saying that you have to cry in order to grieve and mourn. However, knowing that you have the space to do that is important. And I believe everyone has one or two people in their lives. And if you don't, let's find you someone in your life that you can be that real with. But that has to stop because that cycle keeps us going back into those invisible handcuffs of not being able to express our emotions. We locked up, we can't be authentically us. And eventually that's going to do more damage than good for us.
My friend Lane, she gave me a question earlier, and I think you may have answered it already. It says, what are some indicators your grief may be bigger than you could handle on your own? And I wrote down things. You said can't sleep. You said fragmented thoughts. You said depression. You said being so busy that you're not taking the time for yourself, over shopping, maybe overeating, losing weight, gaining weight, substance abuse. Those seem like all things that could be indications that your grief may be a little bit bigger. So then the question that she didn't ask is, it says that you can handle on your own. So you said earlier, first, can you handle grief on your own? That's one question. Can you handle that grief on your own?
Maybe. Maybe. Like, I can't answer for everyone. I feel like for myself and for what I've seen, I feel like it is better if you're not carrying that by yourself. If you have a space to be able to mourn with someone about that. So I feel like it could be a better journey for someone if they have support and connection with other people. So that's my response with that. But you just had a second part of your question, Dee. I think I lost that second part of your question.
Let's see. What are some indicators your grief may be bigger than you can handle on your own? What can you handle grief by yourself? Is it better to handle grief by yourself? Or how do you create the support that you need during or even before the time of grief? How do you create your grieving partners? I don't know if that's the right word.
Right. I hear what you're saying. I feel like some people, we might be at a place where we've been so hurt or so guarded that we've never allowed anybody to see outside of the representative stage. And so going to what you're saying in terms of before the grief happens, trust is not just automatic, right? So if I'm at a place where I experienced a major loss, but I've my entire life secluded myself from people, never allowed people to really see my truth, I'm never going to feel comfortable enough being open with you about my loss. So I am going to end up having to struggle, not necessarily by myself, but I won't be able to lean on friends and family for that support. If you find yourself where you're in that situation, there's roads ahead for you. So I don't want you to feel like you can't have a grief companion here, because you can find a counselor, a therapist. There's support groups for you that you can tap into. It's nice to be a part of a support group of people who understand your grief.
How do you find support groups?
Well, I have a resource guide on my website where it touches on different resources that you can find, and it has support groups listed. You can download that for free at faithonthejourney.org. Again, that's
Faith, F-A-I-T-H, on the journey.org. And they can do what with that?
They can download that grief guide, and it has information on just various websites that you can go to for support groups and other information on grief. So I encourage you to go there online. And Jefferson, if you can put that in the notes for people. But
you don't have to grieve alone.
You don't have to grieve alone, even if you don't have friends or family. Sometimes, again, friends and family could say some dumb stuff. I'm just gonna be frank, So like, don't go to your friends because they might be the cause of your stress. so in cases like that, you can find people who can support you, who you don't even know like that, but you can say, you know what, I've never been authentic and real about anybody in my family or in my network, but I can at least be honest with these people. They don't know me. They're not gonna judge me. They ain't gonna talk about my business. So finding that, I think, is important.
What are some other solutions to helping someone navigate through grief?
So finding community, having a grief companion if possible. And then I think is going through the process of gently, it's a balance, allowing yourself to encounter the pain. That's what I was talking about earlier, is you encounter, then you can pull away, because not all at once, but at some point you have to allow yourself to feel the pain in order to heal. So in order to heal, you have to hurt. You have to be able to go through.
That's what we don't want to do, JJ. We don't want to hurt. What are you talking about? Nobody want to hurt.
And that's the problem. We are very pain averse as a society, but you can medicate this pain for a little bit. You could shock yourself into bankruptcy. You can do all these other things. But at the end of the day, if you still haven't allowed yourself to feel that pain, it's still there. So allowing yourself to feel it, allowing yourself to express it in a way that's healthy. And when I say healthy, it's not damaging to you. And the other thing, I don't want to miss saying this, is sometimes people hold on to beliefs that are really hurting them when it comes to loss. For example, For example, if someone blames themselves for someone passing, like, so I should have never let them drive to that party. If I did, they'd still be here. Or I should have never, done this. Reconciling that can keep someone locked up beyond just the grief. It's also guilt and and regret and shame associated with that.
Yeah.
That's something that you should not. And I'm careful using should words, but I encourage you to get additional support to help you to reframe that, because there's certain things when we associate a meaning to it, and we have this story, this picture in our mind as to, I could have done something to fix this, when sometimes that very well could have not been the case. And if for whatever reason, maybe it was something where you were in a car accident, you were the driver, and the other person died and you survived, you have guilt for surviving, right? And so then this is survivor's guilt. So working through those things, that's real. You need help, because it's the process of forgiving, and this is again a spiritual side, accepting God's forgiveness in the situation if there was something that you literally had something to do with that, and accepting that freedom that belongs to you. That's a process, of not being in bondage from that guilt that is associated with that loss. And so that goes to your friend's question. I would say getting that support in a case like that is crucial.
It seems like guilt is a very powerful yet a very destructive emotion.
So when you say that, so there, I believe there's a thing called like false guilt, if you will. Like, so if you say, for instance, in your mind, again, going down to that example where if only I hadn't let them go, they wouldn't have been a victim of gun violence. So in your mind, you rewrote that story so many times, you convinced yourself, but that's not you. That's not your fault. Right. But we took on that guilt.
False guilt. Is that considered?
Right. Right. So like you took that on, and that's so someone helping you to reframe that narrative that you've told yourself over and over and over again. Sometimes we carry burdens that never belong to us. And so in that's something where I would say we need help letting that go. Guilt, that's a whole nother conversation from a spiritual standpoint that I don't know if you want me to kind of go into, because there is a such thing as righteous guilt. Guilt is not a bad thing, because if you commit a crime, if you shoot somebody, you are guilty. And when we feel guilt, that is something where it's saying, like, we don't necessarily, let me take that back. We don't feel guilt. Guilt is a standing in which I am guilty of doing something that is wrong. It's not necessarily a feeling. We might feel shame associated with that. But guilt is something that sometimes we are guilty of a crime, an offense, whether it's from like a natural standpoint or in the spiritual world. And so that is not, I want to say, a bad thing, but it's kind of how do we respond to that guilt that we feel? Because if we in fact are guilty of a legit crime, is one of those things where do we ask for forgiveness? Do we acknowledge our wrongdoing and accept it from the spiritual standpoint? Do we receive the forgiveness that belongs to us as a child of God after repenting? And so from that's when you get back in right standing, if you will. So that's a whole nother spiritual conversation. I wasn't really going to go
Listen, I'm not afraid of the spirit, because the reason why part of our nation is the way it is because we run away from God, and that is not a good thing. Let me ask you this question. There are many children who are grieving. They haven't been to school. They haven't played with their friends. They haven't socialized. They don't get the affirmations from their teachers. Domestic violence is at an all-time high. Suicide rates are increasing with our young people. Depression is increasing. How does a parent who is grieving themselves, or who's trying to figure out this whole new normal pandemic world, how do they become good for their children or their nieces or their nephews when they're dealing with their own stuff? How do we pull that power?
That's a hard one, D. Honestly, I feel like people have to be honest with their own limitations. We have been taught that we have to be superwoman, super mom, super wife, super whoever, Superman, and we have to say, I need help. I can't handle this. And in saying this, you might not have the most supportive family. And so I don't want to assume that people do have that support network. But thank God, especially in this particular situation, there are services out here that's available nationwide to help people who are dealing with the burdens that are associated with COVID. So in this case, if people can get just enough energy to try to see, okay, what resources are out there and available so I can get the additional support I need. That would be a starting point. But if you do have community, whether it's church, whether it's friends or family, then this is when you have to reach out and say, again, I'm not okay right now. Because if you are at a place where you're pouring out to your children, to your family, to everybody else, and you're empty, it's going to turn out bad for everybody else, because eventually you're pouring from this empty cup that has nothing, and people start seeing you're edgy, you have nothing else to give, or you won't be around for a long time. Because going back to the stress conversation we had earlier, people are checking out early, sadly, because of so many things, that the stress is unreal. So we need you, if you're listening to me, to be around. Your family needs you to be well. You can't care for someone if you're dying, going to like that airplane thing, the mask over your mouth first before you try to save your children. You can't, if you're emotionally checked out because of grief or whatever the case may be, then you have to get care for yourself, because you won't be able to properly care for your children. So I guess to answer your question, the first thing I would suggest is people being honest about, I need help. And then at least if you have one person in your life who can accompany you, a grief companion or whatever companion, just someone who says, I got you. I know you ain't got the strength, but at least you called me. Let me help you find the resources you need to navigate this.
You know, it's interesting. As you were saying what you were saying, I was thinking about a friend of mine who lives in California. She's one of the sweetest women I have met. She has 3 children. She just brought in her mom in her home. I think it may be 2 bedrooms, maybe 3, no more than that. And she's working a job. She doesn't get paid that much. And her heart is so big, and she's always trying to win, but life keeps, slapping her here and there. And so when you were saying reach out and get help, I really don't know if she's on here, but I really hope she is. If she's not, I want to tag her, because I think that message, I just wonder sometimes, how does she do it? Because it takes so much strength and so much, it's easy to be single, but maybe it's hard to be single. I don't know. But I don't know. I don't know what, if you have, so you gave a solution to get help, to create community, but how do you really do that when you're always running and making this deadline and that deadline? You got kids who are screaming in the background. You got and I actually, one of my neighbors just moved from here to Rhode Island, and she has 3 kids as well. And one child is just not dealing well with this. He is constantly wanting to beat up his brothers. He's constantly yelling. I had to go downstairs one day, like, you will not talk to your mother like that as long as I can hear you upstairs. So what do you do?
That's a rough one, D. I mean, again, people have different dynamics that they're dealing with, and they're trying. I mean, like you said, they working from home, kids are homeschooled, they got all these other dynamics. And so I don't want to act like there's this easy solution. However, I will say this. If you are at the point where you are at the edge, if you don't slow down, then your body will slow you down for you.
You're talking to me right now.
And
I've been moving fast.
That's the reality of the situation.
Can you say that one more time? Because I want to listen this time.
If you don't slow down, your body will slow you down for you. And that one right there, you don't want.
That's what happened to DM Hughley.
Yeah, like whether you in the hospital, whether you are at a place where like you find yourself being depressed and can't function. There's so many different things. Again, going back to that body situation, the body keeps score, right? That we have to understand it's going to happen. So is again, I encourage you, resources do exist. They might be, you might have been taught your whole life to function like this, but to function at a 10, to function at 50, let's go function at 100. Some of y'all are functioning at 100 all the time is not sustainable. And so what do we need to do? You have to figure out like, okay, what can I do to try to lighten this burden a little bit? What can I tap into? What resources? Can I reach out to a church? Can I reach out to this nonprofit? Because at the end of the day, some of this can be too much for one person to carry. And we need you. We need you to be healthy. We need you to be okay.
There's a couple of things I haven't heard yet that I think are very powerful. Exercise. Even if it's walking around your block, doing 15 squats a day, 10, 15 push-ups or whatever it is. But exercise is very important. A lot of people may not be able to afford good, quality, high quality food. So then what do they do if there's a food desert? I mean, it's so much.
No, there's so many disparities, and that's real. We have to acknowledge that the disparities are there. They are real. There are food deserts. There are lack of option. I will say, when it comes to the exercise piece, it's free to walk. Even if you don't want to walk in your neighborhood, there's some places to do great. Like, okay,
other concerns.
Like, seriously, like, I get it. So if that's the case, maybe like we get on the floor, do some old school push-ups, sit-ups, or if you got a phone, pull that stuff on YouTube and watch some of these exercise videos or whatever you can. But even though I know there is a belief that eating healthy can be out of your budget, and sometimes it is. Certain things you might not be able to pay for right now, but there are certain things that are absolutely affordable. There are, like, if you Google online, cheap healthy snacks or cheap meals or whatever, there are ways where you can still eat healthy on a budget. And so I do want people to know that there's options out there. You don't have to have a lot of money to eat healthy. You just have to be a little bit more resourceful to do that.
I have a question because I'm sensing this as I talk to you, and you're not going to like this question.
Okay.
So it's going to challenge the counselor, the theological degree, all of your masters. For the person that's thinking, I'm overwhelmed. The noise of my children, who I used to love, is overwhelming. I lost my job. I cannot afford to take care of my babies anymore. To come to this house, I feel like a failure. Suicide is the best way. Taking the life of my children so they do not have to deal with this burden, with this world, whether it's racism, whether it's poverty, whatever it may be. It seems to me that is the best solution right now. And then at least I can rest if I commit suicide. And maybe I take my family before I go. And at least we can rest, because at least at that time we'll have peace. What do you say to that person?
I would say that I do not want to diminish what you're dealing with right now. Whatever you're dealing with, I know is heavy. It's real. You feel that pain. You feel overwhelmed right now. And right now, you want the pain to go away. And I get that. But I beg you, if you're in that situation, to not make a permanent decision for a temporary circumstance. And I believe you might be at a place where you just feel like, I've been in this too long. I just want this to be over. And I hear you. But in this case, I need you to believe that there is hope out there, that your life matters, and you are valuable to this earth here, and with that being said, this is something where the reach out is important. Just if you get enough strength just to make a phone call to, whether it's, right now, 911, suicide hotline, there's resources out there to help you to navigate everything that's going on. Because sometimes, going back to what I was saying earlier, Dee, sometimes what we're dealing with is too much for one person. And anybody who's feeling this right now, most likely you've been carrying too much by yourself for too long. So there are people out there who will help you to carry this load, but don't give up. Don't cut your life short. The pain, I know you want it to go away, but let's find some other ways to help to lighten that burden so that you can make it through this. That's what I would say.
Mm. I love you, JJ.
I love you too, D.
I just have one more, and I saw Jefferson earlier, so he may have some more. I want to go back to the back panel of your book. It says, we must seek God to heal us. If you find yourself constantly living in the past, or you feel like you can never let people close enough to you to learn who you really are, this book is for you. So one, you mentioned earlier about spiritual. Why is having a spiritual connection important during this time and during the time of grief? And why is it that if you're constantly looking at the past and not allowing people to get close to you, why is that a bad sign? When the people are the ones who've hurt you probably in the first place.
Right. Well, let me clarify in terms of the past. Sometimes we have to go back to go forward. Right. So we have to trace the core back to where the pain first began to see, okay, what is the root cause of this feeling that I'm feeling right now? So I don't think the past is a bad thing, but sometimes we find ourselves getting stuck there. And in doing so, sometimes we don't even realize we're stuck, but we find ourselves in this cyclical, like this pattern of just doing the same things over again and not really understanding why. And it's based on something that's in the past. And so understanding that and being able to kind of look back, but say whatever happened in your past is not necessarily going to define you. It could be a defining moment that you learn from, but it's not who you are. And I think that one thing that we struggle with as a society is that we like to say that you are what you do. You are what you have accomplished. You are the failures that you make. That's not who you are. That's just a part of your journey. But I believe as a woman of God, it's only my creator who can define who I am, right? And so my connection to God, going to your other question, that's what sustains me. At the end of the day, like there are moments where, I'd be like, what is going on in this world? The world seems like it's literally going up in flames right now, And so like looking at all the ugly and all the turmoil that we see around, it can take anybody to a point where they're depressed. But God, the only thing that I stand on is knowing that, first of all, God did not promise us a life without suffering. And that's where we get it twisted. Like this suffering is real. So like in our walk, we're going to experience that suffering. But I find comfort
even people who say they love God, even people who say they're children of God, suffering is a part of that life as well.
It is like our Savior, like, as a Christian, like died on the cross. Like, so if the martyrs who were there.
Yeah, he got his butt whooped too.
Right. So suffering is a part of this walk as Christians. So let's not get that twisted. I know there's a lot of
lied on, you'll be betrayed, you may be beaten.
Yes.
The people who say they believe in you might abandon you. The people who say they'll follow you and protect you may be the ones to hurt you. God, dog.
I know, right? That sounds like it's just a bad situation right there. But that is life. While we're here, we're going to experience suffering, but we're also, I believe, going to experience joys and love and beautiful things in life.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That exists as well. But going back to what I'm saying, what gives me strength is knowing that God is with me in my suffering. And so the strength to be able to sustain these ugly moments in my life when I feel like I can't carry it. I can't carry it sometimes, but God can.
How do you remember that? Because sometimes the pain can be so heavy and the burden is so hard. How do you remember? The word says he will take you through it, which means you got to go through it. How do you remember that he's there with me?
I think that's that going into that pre-work that you were talking about earlier, prior to being in the situation. There's that relationship that I already have with God. I've spent that time in fellowship. I know he's real. And I also have seen those smaller tests in my life where he's brought me through. And I've seen how he's, got me through very difficult situations. And so with that, if you have a memory, if you've been around for long enough and you remember how God has brought you through the other situations, you kind of lean on that and you remember the character of God. And you get to the point where you're like, okay, all right, God, you brought me through that. I know you're with me. I know you see these tears, and I don't feel good right now. This hurts. But God, you give me the strength to get through this moment that I'm struggling with right now. And being honest, just like we talk about being honest with you here, I'm very honest with God about my prayers. Like, God, I am struggling right now.
Can you be that real with God without getting struck down?
I think we can. I think we honestly can have an honest conversation because he already knows you thinking it. He's God. So we might as well have an honest conversation. so that's my 2 cents there, D.
Hey, that's some good that was a nickel. That wasn't just no 2 cents. What you got, brother Noel?
Man, I must say this conversation's been very impactful because one thing I noticed, and you probably noticed this as well, DB, that not a lot of people ask questions today, but more so people have used the comment section as an outlet. And I just think it's so powerful that you both created such an environment, such a space for us to come together. And so we have a comment from Martha Bryant Hall. She said, I was in my mother's room when she died, and my family didn't understand that I didn't cry and said, you don't love your mother. Mm-hmm. And she went on to say, I went to the YMCA and walked in the pool and cried in order to grieve. And I can't imagine a public forum where people would feel that open to share stories like that. So I actually want to just take this time and thank the Facebook audience for just being so vulnerable and sharing your stories with us, because it's so powerful. And I would like to thank DB and Jocelyn Jones for creating this space for people to just share their most, intimate emotions and feelings with the audience.
And you know what? I didn't realize, man, it's been 90 minutes, an hour and a half already, JJ. I want to say regarding that last comment, that is actually my mother. And I remember us thinking, how do you not cry over your mother who's died, who is dead? And I never knew that my mom went to the YMCA to grieve. And I know for a fact that I wasn't a grief comforter to you, Mom. So I want to apologize over the air because I know you've been through a lot. And for you to have that, and you had to grieve alone when we should have been there for you because it was your mother, I sincerely apologize. So to your point, JJ, you can't dictate how people will grieve, and you can't dictate how they will navigate that. So I want you to wrap it up for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, D. I appreciate you just sharing that because I hear your heart on that, and we're all learning. And that's the thing. If you feel like back throughout this conversation, something I said where you're like, oh man, I messed up. I should have done this. I should have done that. Don't stay there. Don't go there. This is not what we're trying to do through this conversation, is make you feel like you're a bad person, because we're all learning. I don't even consider myself an expert on grief because there's no normal way. I'm just trying my best to learn. And so the same thing for you. I appreciate you being a part of this conversation so that you can learn and just have a honest conversation with others and yourself about what's been going on, and understanding that you're not alone in this, because if you feel alone, you're not. And so just understanding that and being kind to yourself in this process is very important. So there's no grief shaming. It's none of that going on here. We're all in this together to support each other, to learn more about how we can be there for each other during this difficult time. And so I hope that this conversation has encouraged you and that you saw yourself maybe in some of the things that we discussed. And D, I just love you so much. I just appreciate who you are as a man of God, and this platform that you allowed me to be on, and how you're trying to educate others and have those conversations that most people are scared to have. And so I thank God for what you're doing and how God is using you. And I just, again, just thank you for this opportunity. And I just wanted to also just say one final thing. If anybody is in need of support, I encourage you to check out my ministry website. There are several free resources available. That's, again, he put that in the notes, is faithonthejourney.org. We have some
faithonthejourney.org.
faithonthejourney.org. And we've got the book. And we also have some healing groups that will be kicking off in about a month. The healing groups are a great opportunity for people to have community with other people and to discuss things that we might have been struggling with as it relates to trauma and loss. And so information about the healing groups are online. The wait list is available for you to sign up for the wait list. And I have some other resources available there too. So just check it out. But again, thank you so much, Dee. I just appreciate you and what you're doing.
Thank you so very much. And you're going to be on this Saturday with Michelle McKinney-Hammond?
It's next Saturday. Next Saturday, I'm with Michelle. Yep. So you'll check that out. Please follow me on social media. You'll hear all about it.
What are your social media?
So on Facebook, it's Connect with Jocelyn. So Connect with Jocelyn. And my name is spelled Jocelyn. Actually, just put that in the chat. Connect with Jocelyn. And then you can also connect on my social media through my website, which he already put in the chat, which is jocelynjjones.com. That'll connect you to me. So yeah, please reach out. I'd love to. If you felt like you needed more support than what was offered here, I'll be happy to send you more resources. But thanks for tuning in. You are awesome. I want to end with your chapter 3. There's a quote that says, "Shame says that because I am flawed, I am unacceptable. Grace says that though I am flawed, I am cherished." So Jocelyn Jones, you are so cherished. I love you so much. Thank you for the information that you've shared. I hope people have learned. I hope that we can all move and be better people, better human beings. And if it's someone who may have been grieving in the past, like I just found out how my mother grieved, then we can maybe repair that. I don't know if we can repair it, but just look inside of ourselves and ask ourselves, can I be better? Can I be a better human being? Can I be more empathetic? Can I be more accepting of how someone may choose to grieve or how they may choose not to grieve? Can I allow them their space to do what they need? But if they need me to be there to support them, as hopefully they would be there to support me. This is Dwayne Bryant, y'all. Ooh, I did not plan to get emotional up here on this doggone call. So Mom, I love you so much. Jocelyn, I love you so much. I want to thank Tavares, Beata, Jefferson, Noel, everyone who was on the Facebook. David, thank you. You're such a thoughtful man. And we may have to get you on one day, but David will talk for 5 hours, I'm gonna tell you. David might have me grieving. Any last words that you have for us? No, just reach out to me. And again, thank you again, Dee. I appreciate you. All right, thank you. So the book is Breaking the Power of the Mask, Jocelyn Jones. Can they get this on Amazon? They can. It's available on Amazon. So you can either go to Amazon, type that title in, or go to one of my websites that are there, and you'll find a link to get you straight to that book. You won't regret it. That book is powerful, if I do say so. Perfect. And when you buy the book, if you say I saw it on Conversation with DB, you will not get a discount, but buy 2 anyway. All right. Love you. Love you too. All right. Take care. Bye. Hey, Jefferson, anything else? I think he's probably grieving right now.
Man, I'm just honored to have been here during this conversation, and thank you all again for being so vulnerable. And I have a lot to think about, and I have to become a better grief partner as well, and I have to learn how to grieve when I feel it as well. And so, just thank you all so much for this powerful conversation.
Hey, thank you, man. I can't imagine you grieving. They're probably like this. Woo! I'm sad. I'm mad. I'm doggone. I feel bad. Woo!
That's only if I grieve after drinking the 5-hour energy.
Love you, brother. Love you, JJ.
All right. See you all.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Live? We're still live, are we?
Oh, I don't know. Are we still live, Jeff?
We are still live. We're
live on social media?
Live on social media.
Oh, so shoot, man. We're getting ready to talk.
We cut the camera real quick.
Hey, that was great. Man. How you feeling?
That was a powerful conversation.
Noel, is your mom still alive?
Yeah, she's still alive. She's here, and every day she lets me know she's still alive because she's calling me, texting me, always looking out. So yeah, she's still alive.
Cool. Well, hopefully you'll have a conversation with her about the moment that you may have maybe not fully understood. I know I will with my mom as well. All right, well, I am getting, JJ is back.
Yeah, I thought we were going to cut off the live so we can have an off-camera conversation.
I'm getting ready to go to the beach and relax. After you said what you said earlier, because I mean, literally from the time I got up this morning, I had to edit the Black Panther series for the video. I had a meeting. Then I've been in the office getting contracts and stuff done. And now I'm going to go relax.
Good for you.
And get something to eat and just go on the beach and lay right on down. And
you relax. You do that, D. Enjoy. Take it all in.
Listen, I'm coming to Chicago, but they're talking about a 14-day quarantine. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
That's depressing. But I'm in a hot spot, Corona capital down here in Florida. So that's what I got to do.
Yeah. That's okay. I'll see you when you get into Shy. I don't care.
Okay, cool. I have my mask.
There you go. We'll mask it up.
That was good. All right, good people. Well, I am not having no after show after no 2-hour show.
We'll talk.
All right, love y'all.
Love you. Take care.